All right, guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over Task Bravo Runway Incursion Avoidance. This lesson should be probably around 15 minutes long. Lesson sources today are going to be Airplane Flying Handbook, Advisory Circular 91-73, and appropriate FAA safety briefings on land and hold shore operations, which I'll go over here in a second. Okay, says 40 to 40 minutes. Like I said, I'm going to try to make this about 15 to 20 minutes long. I'll maybe give you guys some personal stories about some experiences that I had, give you guys some memory aids, equipment tools. You're looking at them, lesson elements. Boom, there you go. Structure actions, we can go ahead and skip that. Okay, so first of all, the definition that I want you guys to remember, or yeah, you don't have to remember it verbatim, but what is a runway incursion? It's any occurrence at an aerodrome, which is I've never heard it been called an aerodrome, but let's just say at an airport or an airport operating area involving the incorrect presence of an aircraft, vehicle, or person on the protected area of a surface designated for the landing and the takeoff of an aircraft. Okay, so basically someone is in a place where they're not supposed to be. Really, you can simplify a runway incursion by saying that. There are 4 different types of categories of runway incursions. Not gonna lie, guys, I've never had to deal with these categories. I've never heard of these categories before I used these slides, which, by the way, these are from Wi-Fi CFI, so credit where credit is due. Forgot to also mention I'm 9 days away from my commercial, or my CFI check ride. Just because I feel like I'm counting down, it's like kind of exciting to say. So there's 4 different categories. There's category A, serious incident where collision was narrowly avoided. Category B, decreased separation with significant potential for collision. Category C, ample time and or distance to avoid the collision. And category D, an occurrence with no immediate safety consequences. I have no idea what these are used for. Somebody in the comments, please let me know where you've seen these been used before. Okay, challenges to taxiing. Okay, we have complete taxiway layout. Oh, cool. Blake Charles playing Hell Loose. I wish, that's the funny thing about being a flight student is that you see all your friends doing fun things and you're just sitting there talking about runway incursions. Complex taxiway layouts, low visibility taxiing, wind correction during taxiing, staying on center line, jet blast, snow or ice covered taxiways. Okay. All right. First and foremost, complex taxiway layout. I want to let you guys know that I fly out of an untowered airport. So I don't really have a lot of experience yet with towered airports. I flew into a Delta, got some fuel, had to deal with their taxi system there, and it was not really that big of a deal. So right here it says, ensure that you write down and read back all taxi instructions, pay close attention to routing and hold short instructions. If you are ever, and this is the key here, guys, if you are ever unsure of a taxi clearance, ask ATC for clarification or request a progressive taxi. What is a progressive taxi? Basically, you can ask a tower, hey, 9562 Quebec requesting progressive taxi. And it sounds like they're basically going to babysit you through the taxiway. I'd imagine this is workload dependent. It really depends on how much stuff they got going on. But really, that should be a last resort, I think. I think that your best bet is to, one, you know what airport you're going to, right? Chances are you know that you're going to LAX or you know that you're going to KBOI, and you can go on ForeFlight or your chart supplement. You could pull up the diagram, and you could run yourself through some scenarios, and you say, okay, if I land at 10 right and they have me exit here, what does this taxiway look like? What does this runway look like? So kind of like practice. It sounds really goofy, but the last thing you want is to be on the runway and realize as you exit, you're like, I have no idea where I'm going. They told me to go to Echo and then go to Alpha and Bravo and then Zulu and then do a 360 and wheelie down the road. Like, you just don't want to be caught off guard. So it's perfectly okay to sit there and take 5 to 10 minutes to study these before you go to the airport, right? Yeah, make sure I highly, highly suggest getting a notepad and a pen. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but the amount of pilots I've seen not do this is shocking. Or get an iPad with an Apple Pen and write down all the instructions and make sure you're reading back the instructions clearly and concisely. And yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've done when I went to like Twin Falls is I honestly studied the taxi diagram before I taxied or before I got there. Low visibility taxiing, most of this, guys, is just common sense, okay? If the visibility at the airport falls below a certain value, ATC may use low visibility taxi charts to simplify aircraft taxiing operations. So when an RVR, right, when the visibility is less than, at Denver, 1200, they give you a specific chart that's used for low visibility operations. Why? Because they are increasing safety by kind of simplifying the directions. Okay. I've never seen one of these. I've never dealt with these before. I didn't even know these existed, low visibility taxiing directions, until I saw this. So that was really cool. Okay, challenging taxiway. Wind correction during taxi. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to explain to you guys how to compensate for crosswinds. I'm just letting you know these are one of the things that are within Task Bravo runway incursion avoidance. There are plenty of videos out there that explain it way better than me on how to taxi with wind. Okay, but it's really important. Why is this in this slide? Because I'm sure that there have been incidences in the past where people were getting pushed around the taxiway by wind, and they run over some lighting systems, or in one of the worst case scenarios, they run into other aircraft, or their aircraft gets flipped over because of the winds, right? They're not compensating for that wind correctly. Staying on the center line. Like I said, this goes without being said. You're like, oh, wow, really? Go without center line? Or stay on the center line? But here's the thing. When you guys are on center line, okay, and you're cruising down, when you are, and this isn't just center line for takeoff, okay, this is also the taxiway. The moment you guys look down and there's any kind of wind, or you're a little bit distracted, all it takes is 2, 3, 4 seconds and you are off the taxiway. You are off the center line, okay? It's just poor practice. It's unprofessional. And remember, there's going to be a point in time when myself and you guys, maybe you already have passengers in the back, and the last thing that you want your passengers to be dealing with is that yaw in the back of that aircraft because you're looking down into your iPad trying to stay on center line. Okay, so just learn to differentiate between brakes and rudder pedals. And I think one of the main things that they're trying to tell you here is that when you're taxiing, just stay on the rudder pedals, okay? Keep your heels on the ground, use those rudder pedals. Don't be using the brakes to slow down, pull power out, and cruise down the taxiway. And one of my instructors, she gave me great advice. She said, instead of looking down at your iPad for taxiway directions, it's perfectly okay to slow down, stop the aircraft, look down at your iPad, make some notes, and continue. That's way better than going all over the taxiway. Land and hold short operations. You will get this on your written test. I believe I got this. I'm pretty sure I've gotten this on all my written tests so far. Land, or lasso, is land and hold short operations. Essentially, a pilot is cleared to land on a runway and must come to a complete stop prior to crossing a runway or a taxiway for other traffic. So if you can see here, basically instead of going completely down the runway, you're going to stop, and you're going to stop at the hold lines. Okay, so those are called lasso operations. Biggest takeaway here, and these are questions that I got on my written test. Are they mandatory? No, they're not mandatory. Can I do a go around? Yes. Another question for you guys: can you deny if air traffic control asks if you can do a land and hold short operation? Can you, as a PIC, deny it? Yes, you can. It's not mandatory. If you accept the lasso, do you have to continue with the lasso? Yes, you do, unless you have an emergency and you can't. It is up to you as the PIC. If you are to accept that lasso, you need to understand, you need to make sure that you're capable of performing that lasso. Okay, so if you have a super heavy aircraft and you accept a lasso and you don't have enough runway, you're going to probably get a call from someone up top. Okay. All right, cockpit activities, sterile cockpit principle, no distractions or unnecessary conversation during critical phases of flight. So what are those critical phases of flight? Taxiing, takeoff, approach, and landing. Okay, it doesn't mean that you can't talk during these phases of flight. It just means that all communications that are happening within the cockpit during takeoff, approach, landing has to be pertinent to the flight. Okay, it depends on your SOP, but I know the airlines, once they get above, 10,000 feet, they can, the cockpit is no longer sterile. That they did this because there were some accidents that could have, there was an accident, a really bad one, I believe, an airliner. You can put it in the comments below, where had the pilots not been distracted, that accident probably wouldn't have happened. So now above 10,000 feet, you can talk. Below it, you cannot. Okay. I mean, even the Cessna 172 in the training environment, I don't like to chit chat on the taxiway. I don't like to chit chat on takeoff. It's just super inappropriate. It's very distracting. It's a critical phase of flight for a reason. Once we get up to cruise, right, then we can start talking about whatever. But yeah. Prior to taxi instructions, have a current copy of the aircraft diagram handy. Review pre-designated taxi routes. Review the expected and possible routing. So this is what I talked about earlier. Don't be afraid to kind of study and rehearse the taxi diagrams before you get to the airport. It's just good practice and it relieves some stress, honestly. Review and brief. So write down the taxi instructions to prevent the mistakes. To prevent mistakes or forgetting. Ask ATC for help in times of confusion. Always conduct a taxi briefing with either yourself, you can say it out loud, or with your partner, okay? Guys, I'm going to be the first to admit that I am not afraid to ask ATC for help, okay? I've done it a few times. I did it on my check ride. That resource is there for a reason. I did a tower tour about 2 months ago, and they said, I asked them, what is one thing that you want to see student pilots do more of? And they said two things. They said, one, communicate clearly your intentions, okay? And when they communicate with you, respond back. Don't just pause and or ignore them. And also ask for help if you need it. Okay, so if you're confused, you don't know where you are, you're disorientated, you're stressed, ask for help. Yeah, they might be a little irritated. They might be frustrated. They might yank you around a little bit. They might give you a 360, whatever. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to use it. That's what they're for. And honestly, most of the time, ATC is pretty cool. Hotspots. Hotspots are on aircraft diagrams, and they are areas of common confusion amongst pilots and or areas of high congestion. So be sure to look out for these and brief your plan to deal with them during the taxi briefing. So what is a hotspot? It's an area on your taxi diagram to which accidents have happened, mistakes have happened multiple times in the area. So what is it? It's basically telling you to be cautious of that area. It's not going to tell you what has happened. It's not going to tell you the last accident or what that accident looked like. It's just simply telling you, hey, in this area, it gets really confusing. So pay attention to that. Okay, that should be in your taxi briefing. Airport signage. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. It's something that I have struggled with in the past. It's been on all of my written exams, at least a couple of questions about airport signage. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about these. There's a bunch of other videos about it, but just know that an important part of preventing runway incursions is knowing airport signage. Okay. Here's some more airport signs. Runway, safety area boundary, ILS area. These are, just know your signage, guys. Take the time, 30, 45 minutes to watch some YouTube videos about airport signs. Make yourself flashcards if you have to. Yes, this is one of the things that they kind of make sense when you look at them, right? But like an ILS critical area boundary, like would you know what that is had you have never seen that before? Probably not. Would you know to be cautious around the area? Yes. My point is, take the time to learn all this stuff. And it's on your written test anyways, and it could be on your check ride. Has a DPE ever asked me about airport signage? No. Have I ever been in a situation at an airport where the airport signage was confusing and I wish I had studied more? Yes. Okay, so just learn that. Airport markings, movement areas versus non-movement areas. It's pretty self-explanatory, guys. These are basically areas, we don't have these. I'm at a non-towered airport. I gotta stop saying that because one day I'm gonna be, a citation pilot. You guys are gonna watching this 4 years later and be like, that guy doesn't know what a non-movement area is. I haven't had to deal with this before, okay? But here's the picture for you guys. All it says on here is that this is the area of movement, right? This is probably the area that's closely monitored by ATC at all times. And this sounds like an area for, I don't know, run-ups and stuff like that, and or vehicles. Correct me if I'm wrong. All right, taxiing procedures, steering and control. And it has some bullet points here for us. Use the rudder pedals to maintain the center line. Never ride the brakes while taxiing. That's what I talked about earlier. Why is that? Because one, it's really bad for your passengers in the back. It's unprofessional, and you're putting unnecessary wear and tear on your brakes, okay? You're hitting them up for no reason. If you need to slow down, pull power back, okay? Keep the speed back to a pace of a brisk walk and jog. For us, it's 12 knots on the taxiway. That is SOP dependent. It changes for person to person, but just keep it slow. Only use as much power as needed. So for us, when you're taxiing, we use 1,000 RPMs, and that's about all we need. Test brakes after engine starts with power reduced. I actually believe on the ACS, on the safety portion, I can't remember which category it was, it's actually on there. It's required that you actually do test brakes after engine start with power reduced. That is one of the first things that you do after you get going. You check brakes. And if you don't, you're wrong. That's actually a standard that you need to maintain. Okay? I didn't even know this. My instructor and I always just did it. But a lot of people don't know it's mandatory. After landing, brief the landing after receiving runway assignment. Okay? So if you know what runway you're going to land on, brief it. How long is the runway? How much distance do we need to stop? What are the winds looking like? Which direction is the wind coming from? If we need to do a go around, what is the missed approach procedure? Stuff like that. Depart the runway once speed is under control. So once you're stabilized, once your speed is under control, depart the runway. Now, does that mean if you are too fast, but there's a convenient exit coming up, do you slam on your brakes and skid off the runway? No, just catch the next one. Okay? If stopped between parallel runways, do not cross until cleared by air traffic control. Okay? Goes without being said. Ensure the aircraft is completely clear of all hold short lines. Also, another really important thing, do not put your nose over the hold short line. Stay far away from the hold short line, like several feet back, like 5, 10, 15 feet back from the hold short line. Do not attempt to exit the runway at a high speed. So this is what I talked about earlier. There's been many times, and I've made this mistake before, where I land, I have too much speed in, but I'm already at the top of the hour, my flight block is over, and I really want to get off the runway like as soon as possible, and then you just skid off the runway. Okay, so don't do that. Controlled versus uncontrolled airports. So for controlled airports, use proper pilot / controller phraseology. So in our case, it's going to be proper pilot phraseology. If you need to rehearse or understand what proper phraseology is, I believe that it is within our FAR AIM, and it tells you, I think it's a massive, let me actually look at this up. Proper pilot phraseology, I spelled that wrong, PDF. I believe there's a PDF by the FAA. They publish this. I believe it's massive. Yeah, so it's massive. Okay. It's like, how many pages is this? 129. Now, am I saying go through this and study phraseology? No, this is something you're going to kind of learn through your flight training just naturally. A lot of it makes sense, but don't be afraid to learn your phraseology. Okay. You'll see a lot of people, they start to get a little too comfortable with using non-standard phraseology, and it just leads to, there's a reason why it's standardized for a reason, and it's because non-standard phraseology has led to accidents before. Okay. Write down and review taxi instructions. We already talked about that. Ask ATC if you're ever unsure. We already talked about that. That's what they're there for. Properly read back ATC clearances. Okay, makes sense. And follow ATC instructions. I don't think I need to worry about most of you guys or myself not following ATC instructions. Uncontrolled airports. Guys, this is my bread and butter. I have been flying out of only uncontrolled airports for 2.5 years now. It's like pretty much all I know, which is funny because some of you guys only know towered airports, and it has its pros and cons, right? I would say that uncontrolled airports are way more dangerous. I've seen some crazy stuff happen at uncontrolled airports. People going backwards in the pattern, no radio calls, because really at the end of the day, it's like they don't have to make radio calls, right? They don't even need a two-way radio in Echo airspace. Is that the right thing to do? No. Does it happen all the time? Absolutely. Okay, so look for aircraft in the local traffic pattern and be wary in calm winds. Why does it say be wary in calm winds? Well, first of all, the winds change a lot. Okay, you can have calm 1 second, and then it can be 7 knot crosswind the next. Okay, look out for local airport traffic. That just makes sense, right? Look on your radar. Look on your ForeFlight. listen to the radio, make sure you're checked in the right frequency. One of the things that I always emphasize during my flights is I constantly check in on my frequencies, and I make sure that I'm on the right frequencies. Why? Because there has been times in the past where I've been coming into an airport, I'm on a 5-mile final doing all of my radio calls, and I realize, embarrassingly enough, I'll admit it, I've been on the wrong frequency the entire time. And that is a terrible, horrible feeling, especially when there's people in the pattern. Okay, I cannot emphasize that enough. Be alert, communicate intentions clearly. Okay, makes sense. Maintain awareness of other aircraft positions. This is huge. Situational awareness is massive. When you first start flight training, building that picture of aircraft positions in an untowered airport is extremely difficult because you just don't, like, you're so focused on the flight controls, right? You're so focused on where you're at in the moment that it is really, really hard to keep an active picture of what's going on in the pattern. But I promise you, if you're not there already, you will get to a point where you are flying, you know, like today, for example. I was like 8 miles out. I started at 7,500. I had to get down to 3,200. And I had to do descending right 360s or left 360s. And that whole time as I was descending, there was 3 people in the pattern, and I just had a mental picture in my head of where these people were. Okay, 6-2 Quebec is on the downwind. They're coming in on the crosswind. Okay, we got a guy coming in on final here, this way. It's amazing. You'll be able to handle this, I promise. Continuously monitor and talk on the CTAF frequency. Okay, so first of all, make sure you have the right frequency and always be talking on it. And goes without being said, right? Be aware of possible instrument approaches. Guys, this is freaking huge because at an untowered airport, people are doing instrument approaches. And when you're downwind and a guy has been calling his finals for the last 10 miles, you're turning your freaking base and all of a sudden they're one, right? So you're going this way, you're turning base, and he's right here a mile out and you cut him off. That is not good, okay? So just be aware that people are going to be doing instrument approaches. 99% of the time, they're probably going to go missed. But still, be careful with that. Okay, aircraft lighting and night ops. Exterior aircraft lights make the aircraft easier to see. Oh my God, who knew? It is also important that we know when to turn these lights off for night operations, okay? Why don't you want to have the strobes on when you start up the aircraft, when you're taxiing down the runway? Because it freaking blinds all the other pilots around you. I remember I had a night flight about 4 months ago. It was my commercial night flight, and I had to do my 10 takeoffs and landings at a towered airport. And there's an aircraft to my left. They just started up the aircraft. I had mine started already. I was preserving my night vision. And then I'm like looking, I tap 5 times to turn on the airport lighting system. And as I'm looking out, the aircraft to my left turns on their strobe lights. And I just look straight into the strobe like a moth to the flame. And it just destroys my night vision. I'm like, oh, it's like it's like the paparazzi just showed up. Okay, so it says strobe lights prior to takeoff, crossing the runway. Landing lights prior to takeoff, crossing the runway. Why? Because you don't want to blind people. Beacon light prior to engine start. Position lights prior to taxiing. Taxi lights prior to taxi. Okay, this is something that you're going to learn more over time. But really, if you just think about it, you're like, why don't I want to turn on my strobe lights? Why do I want to leave that until before my takeoff? Because you don't want to blind people, right? Other night considerations. Taxiing at night. I've taxied at night many times. It generally hasn't been that big of a deal in the airports that I've flown out of. But here it says, be more cautious due to reduced visibility, maintain situational awareness, and stay on your route. Taxi at a lower speed. Look closely at taxiway and runway markings and signs. Use aircraft exterior lights to be visible to other pilots. Okay, makes sense. Is there anything else I can talk about this? No, I don't think so. Okay, lesson summary, guys. Today we talked about, we did lesson Bravo, taxiway incursions, and preventing such incursions. Guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you have any constructive criticisms, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I want to also make aware to you that there's actually an advisory circular 91738 that talks about runway incursions. It's 18 pages long. It defines runway incursions, what pilots should and should not do. It kind of is like that slide, but it's just a little bit more formal. So what I would do is I would go ahead and go read this. It's always good to read the advisory circulars. It'll only take you about 15-20 minutes. Okay, guys. Appreciate you guys watching the video. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.